Hey friends, welcome to episode 165 of Coming Up Next, the podcast, my interview with actor Simon Maiden. But before we get to the interview, don't forget you can support the show by subscribing, by rating and reviewing the show, which you can do at www.comingupnext.com.au. It's not going to cost you anything, it's maybe just a little bit of your time, and I'll keep bringing you this show for free each and every week. Now let's get to it. It's podcast time, friends. Welcome to another episode of Coming Up Next, the podcast. First of all, thank you to my previous guest, John Patrick Shanley, for coming on the show. John is one of the most legendary contemporary playwrights, if not playwrights of all time. He's an Oscar-winning screenwriter as well, and just a very insightful human being. So if you haven't listened to that one, you've had 2 weeks. What are you doing? Sorry for the delay in release again. Last week, I woke up on Tuesday, which was a day that I was scheduled to fly from Melbourne to London, and also cut my podcast because I like to leave that to the last minute. And the display on my laptop was Cactus. So thanks, Apple, for providing me with a display that would only last a couple of years. But I didn't really have time to get it fixed. I did make an attempt, but unfortunately it meant that this podcast was not to be edited for last week. So minor technical hiccup. If you missed the dulcet tones, you could have found them at comingupnext.com.au, where there's also links to subscribe to the show and do all the other things that I'm constantly encouraging you, the good listener, to do. Simon Maiden is an actor that you will most certainly be familiar with if you've been watching any Australian television for the last 10, 15 years. I first met Simon. He acted in a short film that I made when I was at film school called Shotgun, which you can find online in various places. But Simon has, his list of credits includes all of the big shows: All Saints, Rush, Neighbours, Tangle, Dr. Blake, Underbelly, Satisfaction. He played a young Winston Churchill in Deadline Gallipoli. And most recently, you won't be seeing him, but you can hear him in Leigh Whannell's new film Upgrade, which is available for your consumption on the various on-demand platforms. I would suggest iTunes if you are an Apple user. Make sure you have a display that's working correctly. We get into all the usual ramblings. It was great to just sit down and catch up. So here it is, episode 165 of Coming Up Next with Simon Maiden.
It seemed to pop up in my Twitter feeds and news feeds that there was this film coming out or doing a festival circuit sort of towards the start of the year called Upgrade. And then the next thing I knew, I saw that your name was linked to this film from this, quite prolific Australian, would you call him a horror or thriller director?
Yeah, I don't know.
Don't really know how to categorize
Saw was
him.
definitely horror, you'd have to say.
Yeah.
Insidious probably is as well.
Yeah. But Upgrade's not.
No, it's it's a sci-fi thriller set in the near future, but with these wonderful sort of throwbacks to things like RoboCop and Terminator. Leigh and I are similar ages, and Logan Marshall Green, who played Grey, were all about the same age, and they were all the films that we were talking about the whole time. And it was great, because, in case anyone doesn't know, I don't actually appear on screen. I'm the voice of an AI component known as STEM, and it brought up a whole lot of new challenges for me acting wise.
Yeah, I bet.
I've never had a problem learning lines. It's just I'm very fortunate. I learn lines quite quickly. With this one though, because I hadn't sort of connected it to anything physical, or if you're playing a bunch of ones and zeros, then what's your emotional kind of driving force for it?
Yeah.
So anytime that they'd ring the bell and say turnover, I initially I would panic. I'd be reaching for the sides so that I could make sure that I knew. Yeah, I know the lines. And always just offset as well, because so that Logan could hear me. But you don't want to voice so close to him that he's turning his head every time I speak. So
yeah,
it was interesting.
That would have been a very interesting process, and that was shot in Melbourne, wasn't it?
Yeah. We shot it down at the Dockland Studios and on location around here for it was a $5 million US was the budget.
Okay.
Which from what I know is Blumhouse Pictures, who produced it. That's their kind of business model.
Yeah.
They say, here's $5 million, go and make whatever film you want. We love the script, we trust in you, but don't ask us for a penny more.
Right.
Because none will be forthcoming.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's been very successful for them. When you think, Get Out was from them. It was a similar thing, $5 million. God, I don't know what it's crashed through at the box office now, but it's up in the hundreds.
Yeah. That's it's an interesting model. I suppose it's almost a throwback to what. Well, I guess we don't really talk about Miramax, but what was kind of going on around early '90s in that sort of time and space.
Yeah.
Although there's probably the funds were probably a little bit more or a little bit less limited then.
Yeah, well, I think Blumhouse have made their name as kind of genre picks. Very much horror and slasher and all the rest of it, and little by little they're moving into sort of a grander fare, artistic perhaps, in a lot of ways.
It's interesting that you talk about the process, because one of the things that I was keen to speak with you about was not only the difference in process with working on something like Upgrade, where the challenges that are presented to someone doing voice acting as opposed to physical acting. But, you've had this career where you've kind of moved between... Well, you've been on basically every Australian television show that's been available to you. And you've worked on small Australian films and bigger American films, as well as, telemovies, and kind of across the spectrum. You've, I guess, dabbled in all areas of acting, as well as having gone to one of the most prestigious schools in Australia. So I suppose, how have you found that you have evolved as a performer through that kind of process? It's probably not really a conscious evolution, but what's the difference that you found in terms of how you were prepping when you would begin, and what your process would be to where you've kind of landed now?
As in beginning of career?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, it's 20 years this year since I started studying at Whopper, which is enough to make you kind of sit back and go, wow, okay. I've been at this a while now.
Yeah. And you grew up in Ballarat as well, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I grew up in Ballarat. My parents met doing an amateur theatre production, and were engaged shortly thereafter. So I've always I've grown up around the theatre. My sister as well, my younger sister. And I was just one of those precocious kids who, at the age of 5 or 6 was wanting to run lines with mum and dad in whatever play they were doing, I remember going to see Dad in a rehearsal for A Man for All Seasons, and he was playing the executioner, and I saw Dad walk on stage and then pull out this massive axe, and I was just, why is he doing? Is that Dad or is that the executioner kind of thing? I was hooked from that moment.
Right. What was your first experience of performing, or was it? I'm assuming it was for your parents.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I there was always a piano in the house. There was always guitars, so there was lots of stuff like that. I was always singing. Very, very fortunate that music came very naturally to me, and I mean, the first proper production that I did was as Kurt Von Trapp in The Sound of Music for the Ballarat Begonia Festival in about 1980 something, and it just went from there. You know, lots of amateur theatre productions, lots of productions at school. My dad was in charge of directing the school musicals, and he also is known pathologically for getting bored very quickly, so he didn't want to just recycle the same sort of shows that you'd seen 100 times. So, you know, we were doing shows like Cabaret, Little Shop of Horrors,
oh wow,
you know, Barnum,
yeah,
you know, challenging stuff. And all the way through high school, I think I knew in the back of my mind that was where I was going to head.
And obviously your parents would have been supportive of that choice.
Oh yeah. I think they realised by the time I'd sort of, you know, finished high school, and I moved to Melbourne to start a course in information management at the University of Melbourne.
Right.
At the same time, I was commuting back to Ballarat every night to do a production of Les Miserables.
Okay.
So, you know, sort of get up, crack of dawn, go to lectures, not knowing really what the course was all about. Couldn't wait to get back in the car and get back. You know, after 3 weeks, I sort of realised and turned to Dad and said, about that first semester tuition, really sorry, but I don't think I'm going to be following through on this.
Yeah.
And, you know, I bummed around for a few years, you know, part-time jobs, and played in bands. And eventually a very good friend of mine decided on a whim that he was going to audition for NIDA, and got in. And that kind of kicked me in the bum a bit to think, you know what? You know, all those thoughts that I'd had about, I'm not going to go and study. They'll train all the originality out of you. Just realised that's just foolish talk, isn't it? Yeah.
Just a bit of laziness.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. And I was very fortunate. I went off to Perth and studied with some great people, great teachers, wonderful, you know, made wonderful lifelong friends. And yeah, from there we sort of graduated, moved to Sydney, and I've been fortunate. I've kind of worked steadily without ever really sort of becoming a household name or having the lead role or the star turn too much. But I've managed to, I think for the last 19, 20 years, put, you know, actor or voiceover artist on my tax form each year, which is, you know, it doesn't happen for a lot of people.
Yeah.
The numbers that drop off from drama school, there's less of us who are still doing it from my class than there are, you know, not.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the same from like going to film school. You know, there's a certain amount that, certain distance that I think talent alone gets you, and then the rest of it is just hard work and tenacity.
And dumb luck.
Yeah, and being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I remember I was auditioning for Deadline Gallipoli for one of the soldier roles. I read the script. It was one of these characters who was known as the Ballarat Boys, who were, you know, these four guys from Ballarat who all went off to war together. And so I sort of cheekily, you know, in my auditions was saying, like, by the way, born and raised in Ballarat, that's got to count for something, doesn't it? And, you know, I'd auditioned, I was happy with it, and then apparently they were struggling to find someone to play a young Winston Churchill. And one of the producers was watching the tapes, pressed pause as another one came in, and I think it might have even been Jacqueline Persky, who was one of the writers and producers. And she just sort of saw my face on the screen and went, he could play Churchill. And sort of pulled up a photo of the young Churchill next to me and went, yeah. And, you know, that's just it's dumb luck.
Yeah. Wow, that's like millimeter perfect timing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thankfully they hadn't paused on you and Leslie's face or something like that.
So were there any teachers at Whopper that you kind of specifically connected with, who had a particular ethos or philosophy that, you know, you still have in the back of your mind when you go to an audition or a job?
Well, Chris Edmund is a dear friend, and he was a wonderful acting teacher, and he was in charge, I think he was the head of directing when I was there, and he only directed us in one show in the entire 3 years that we were there, which was a production of Hamlet. But his attitude and philosophy, there's a good deal of kind of English grit in him, which is, get down, get in the trenches and get your hands dirty and do it. We were doing a tech rehearsal of Hamlet with you and Leslie playing Hamlet and I was playing the Ghost, and we were both pissing about a bit, and from the back of the theatre this voice just went, "Act better!" It's a simple note, but it was kind of like, actually maybe we should. Let's try doing that. Let's try putting our big boy pants on and actually doing what we're here to do.
Right.
Yeah. I like that. I like the practical nature of stuff like that.
Well, I think you go to places like that hopefully to get your ass kicked, even if you don't realise it at the time.
Yeah. And you do. There were areas that I was not comfortable in. Every movement class. I've got 2 left feet.
Yeah.
But it was just not an area that I'd ever explored and hadn't realised how much it can tie into everything, the holistic nature of performance, particularly on stage.
And I think also having that kind of education, even if it's not like of direct benefit, so you may never use those movement skills again, but becoming comfortable in a situation where you're uncomfortable helps you. I mean, we said at the top with the upgrade, you felt uncomfortable in that, but there was probably a certain level at which you could philosophically move through that because you've been in uncomfortable situations before and hadn't died.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it like that, but you're absolutely right. You've after 20 years of doing it, you become equipped with the tools to be able to deal with things on the spur of a moment. Yeah, because you got to be ready for anything when you're particularly in acting, because you never know what opportunities are going to come up more than anything.
Yeah, and I think you talk about things being dumb luck, but there's a certain level at which you're putting yourself in the position to be exposed to dumb luck as well.
Yeah. That's very true. That's the very nature of doing it. I mean, it's a foolish profession to get into when you consider that you walk into a room to audition for a part. You very, very rarely get any feedback whatsoever apart from, "Thanks, yeah, it's nice to see you, good on you." And there's a yawning chasm between walking out of the room and getting the phone call saying, usually saying, "No, they've gone in a different direction," or "Yes, hooray." But that gulf of just not knowing what is going into the decision-making process can be quite painful to negotiate.
Yeah. How do you reconcile that?
I've come to approach auditions and things differently in the last couple of years. I read Bryan Cranston's autobiography, and he had this fantastic approach, which was that you're not going in to audition for a job, you're going into an audition to do your job. Which is, if you're an actor, then you just you want to perform, you want to act, so that's an opportunity to do that. And then when you walk out of the door, tear up the script, throw it away, and don't think about it again. You've done your job.
Yeah. If
you get a chance to do that particular job again and on a larger scale, fantastic. If not, I mean, it's easy in principle. It's taken me a good couple of years to be able to really kind of trust that I am approaching it like that, but it has made things a hell of a lot easier.
I guess it takes the pressure off the need for an outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess it's the luxury of being a bit older as well now. You kind of, I don't feel like I'm holding on to the grim death that this is going to be this is the one that'll change everything. We're going to toppermost to the poppermost with this. It's just not about that. It's about getting to enjoy doing the work with good people. Usually, there's nothing else that I'd rather do though.
So what was your MO, I suppose, when you did finish Whopper and you came out? What was it that you were holding on to, or what was the kind of long shot objective?
Well, to work with Paul Thomas Anderson. Clearly, you've beaten me to that one. I had grand plans, but when I graduated, it wasn't as commonplace as it certainly is now. I mean, the big question when we were in Perth was, are you going to base yourself in Melbourne or are you going to base yourself in Sydney?
Right.
The thought of moving to LA was just anathema. Heath Ledger did that. But he's Heath Ledger and he's amazing and beautiful and all the rest of it. But there weren't too many others. Russell Crowe and Guy Pearce and Naomi Watts perhaps. But the thought of doing it as just, that's the choice. We'll go and crack the LA market.
Never going to happen.
Never occurred to me,
Yeah.
American movies came out to Australia every now and then to shoot. And, if you were fortunate, you'd get to work on it and maybe have stars in your eyes and go, this will be the one, this will catapult me. They'll recognise me playing Father McPherson with all 4 lines that I've got. And John Dahl will cast me in everything that he does from now on because that's the way the stars are aligning. Can't you just see it? But I guess the realistic MO for me was that I just wanted to work. I wanted to work on Australian stories. I didn't care if it was theatre or music theatre or film or television. You're young, you're hungry, you're in the workforce as a professional actor for the first time, really, and you're just hungry. So, there were lots of kind of independent theatre productions and things like that up in Sydney before I moved back to Melbourne. There's been lots of independent theatre productions down here as well. If the story's great, and why not? It means that you're acting.
Yeah. Well, I guess if that's the kind of philosophical approach that you take, then that's always going to be satiating your desire or your thirst to perform.
Yeah, and that's not to say that you don't. I mean, it's impossible not to with the incredibly talented bunch of friends that I have, to sometimes look at them and their opportunities and their career trajectories and go, why them and not me? How come? Why didn't I get to audition for that role? I could have. And you wonder and you question and all the rest of it. But everyone's path's different.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very fortunate. I do quite a lot of voiceover work these days as well, and that really pays the bills. And then the acting work, as it comes about, it's a small industry in Australia. So there's not always going to be a hell of a lot of opportunities. So when they do come along, I approach it with going, well, you grab them with both hands.
And I guess having or being able to do voiceover as well in your back pocket is a great tool for versatility, as well as probably being something that you enjoy doing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I do all sorts of voiceovers. I voice a couple of sports shows that get sold overseas each week. One about soccer and one that's a wrap-up of world sport and all that sort of thing. Yeah, not being a soccer fan, I now know more about international football than I ever thought I could possibly know.
Right.
Yeah.
I went to the Champions League final in Kiev.
Did you really?
I did. I'm a big Liverpool supporter.
Right.
Yeah, it was pretty... It was the most exciting disappointment of my life.
Well, they're off to a good start this season.
They are off to a very good start. Good manager, good team.
Jurgen Klopp.
And now we're getting completely off track. But I had this moment where I thought, because having been following them for 20 years, there's obviously ups and downs as there is supporting any football or sport.
I barrack for Carlton in the AFL, mate. I know all about it.
That's only really down for the last 20 years.
Thank you.
But I had this moment of realization. I think it was towards the end of last season where I thought, there's no one else in the world of football that I would rather have at Liverpool than Jurgen Klopp.
Wow.
Because of the way that he's just significantly changed the culture of the entire team. It's not only that he's brought a better style of play or attracted better players from kind of the inside out. He's really changed everything, the entire culture of the team. And it's with a long-term vision to sustain success. It's not like with, I guess, a Manchester City or a Manchester United or PSG where, they're like just throw as much money as possible at the wall, and hope that it sticks in the short term and will fix it in the long term as well.
Oh, good manager is everything, isn't it?
Yeah,
coach,
absolutely. And I used to actually get very inspired. Liverpool had a manager about 10 years ago named Rafa Benitez. Mm-hmm. And I used to just read everything that he said because I was like, I always saw my role in like a production as being similar to a football manager's role.
Yeah, absolutely.
As either a director or a producer. And the philosophy, I just read so much about their philosophies because it's so similar. And I took a lot of inspiration from those. And then you just have years where there's bad managers there and it just rots the club. That's
fascinating. That's a really good, very, very, very good sports analogy to bring it back to career.
Yeah.
I told one of my mates that I was going to be interviewed by you for this podcast. He said, "Why is he interviewing you?" I said, "I don't know." Thanks, first of all, but I don't know. The life of a journeyman actor. And he was like, "Oh, you are a bit like a journeyman, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're like Farron Ray for St Kilda." It's like, again, thanks but no thanks. Maybe like Cade Simpson, the veteran defender playing off the half-back flank and setting up all the stars up ahead. Maybe that's a nicer way to look at it, I think. Yeah.
I think there are a lot of similarities. I was having dinner with a family friend last night he's a lawyer. And, there's a lot of mystery for people who don't work inside film about what certain roles are. A lot of people don't understand necessarily the difference between a director and a producer. And I said to him, the director's kind of like the captain of the team and the producer's the manager. That was kind of but then there were kind of holes in that theory, but that was the most kind of logical.
So what does that make the first AD then?
First AD is the physio. Running onto the field when someone gets injured.
I like that. Yeah.
But I mean, it's not a great analogy because the director's not like really on the field playing necessarily. But anyway, it's sports and creative aligning is the point.
Exactly.
And I like Liverpool and Jurgen Klopp.
And Jurgen Klopp.
So what was the first gig that you got when you came out of Whopper and you'd settled in Sydney?
That was Changi, a 6-part mini-series that was written by John Doyle from Roy and H.G.
Mm-hmm.
About prisoners of war in the Changi prison camps. And every young actor was auditioning for it. Oh, my God.
Right.
There were scripts flying around everywhere and go, who are you going to go in for? Who are you going in for? Who are you going in for? Oh, really? Oh, you're up for that? I'm up for that as well. Yeah.
Was this like 2005?
2001.
2001, okay.
Yeah, because we graduated in 2000. And I had recall auditions for there was 6 main characters, 6 POWs, and each episode was told from the perspective of them being in the camp and their point of view of it, and then as an old man. So you also had these giants of kind of Australian TV and entertainment, really, Bud Tingwell and all sorts of people.
Yeah, wow.
And I had a recall for a couple of the parts and got really close and then didn't land it, and I was desperately disappointed, and I was like, well, yes, this is what I'm going to have to start getting used to. But then got a call saying that they wanted to offer me the part of the grandson of one of the characters in the present day. So I was Stephen Curry's grandson,
right?
Who I think was played by Bill Kerr, I think. But I remember we got to have a little bit of an audition, bit of rehearsal, and Nadine Garner came in to play my girlfriend, and I couldn't believe it. Because she's like proper professional actor. I grew up watching the Henderson Kids and all the rest of it, and she couldn't have been nicer. Because I was very upfront with them. Just said, this is my first gig, so apologies if I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Yeah.
And the dean was wonderful. Kate Woods, who directed it, was wonderful as well. It was a fantastic experience.
Yeah. Was there a level of anxiety and nervousness going into it?
Oh, first day setting foot on the set. God, yes. even just in terms of getting there, how do I make it to the studio on time? Who do I speak to? Because there's a way in which a set works, and nowadays, head towards the catering. You'll find someone who can put you in touch with whoever you need to be. But I just had no idea, wandering around the studios of ABC in Sydney. Okay. I know I've got a line about a tomato sandwich here somewhere, but it's about as much as I can really do at the moment.
Yeah.
But it was great. I loved it as well. It's so different to theatre, but which had been the focus of 3 years of training at Whopper. We did a couple of short films in our third year, but being on set with all the cameras and all the people and just seeing how much of a team sport it is was a real eye opener, and one that I just couldn't wait to just do again.
Yeah. So I guess from doing that through to something like Deadline Gallipoli, in terms of the work that you were doing, well, Deadline Gallipoli, I guess, was a mini-series more than a TV serial series. But, throughout that, like I said before, you'd done most shows that were available to be done. Like you said, a journeyman kind of actor. How did you feel as though, I guess, your comfortability and your technique and the way that you would approach things has shifted over that 15 or probably 18 years?
Yeah. I guess on camera I'm still learning. Just less is more. The face tells a whole lot more than you can even imagine, And I often find myself watching the great film actors and just going, they're not doing anything, but they're telling me everything. And it's such a subtle thing, So I guess, like I say, I'm always still learning. Every time I'm on a set and you watch someone else, there's always something to learn and pick up and improve on. I guess in answer to your question, I do feel more comfortable on a set these days, just because, but that's just familiarity. You do something enough times, and you learn how to do it.
And also, I guess the Australian industry is small enough that after a little while, you probably start to be quite familiar with all the faces that you start seeing. So there's not that kind of first day at school, Groundhog Day every time you walk onto a new set.
Yeah, which is very helpful as well, because you can. I'm so goddamn terrible at remembering names, though. I can remember faces. I can remember what we did, and did we go out? We were on location, weren't we? But I can't remember your name for the life of me. I'm so sorry, But it's just, you're absolutely right. Yeah, there's people, and I think because the industry is so small in Australia, people work really, really hard to do their jobs well and to the absolute best of their ability, because that's how you get employed again.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if it's crew, cast, catering, unit, does not matter. Everyone is working so hard. I don't think a film like Upgrade could have been made on the budget that it had anywhere other than Australia. Because, I think if it had been made in America, that they probably would have said, God, this budget is so restrictive, we can't do anything. But there was a real attitude on the set of just like, who cares what the budget is? This is what we've got. This is how we're going to make it look really fucking cool.
Yeah.
And it does, you wouldn't know to watch that on the big screen. I remember we went to South by Southwest for the premiere this year and saw a midnight screening with a cinema full of Leigh Whannell fans who wanted to love this film.
Yeah.
But the moment the picture came up, I was sitting next to Logan and my wife Zoe was on the other side, and I kind of nudged them both and we went, fuck, this looks good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was so exciting.
Doesn't look like a $5 million film that was made on location in Melbourne.
No, it really, really doesn't. It really doesn't. And again, just it's humbling and it's inspiring when you see people just going the extra mile to make sure that we're going to make the best thing that we can possibly make here. And I think that's, maybe that's just a general Australian approach to it. Apparently in Hollywood, a lot of Australians are known as very hard workers.
Yeah, my experience of working overseas has definitely been that Australians have a good reputation for being very hard working, kind of just say yes to anything kind of attitude.
Yeah, probably on occasion to our detriment. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah.
We don't need a safety coordinator, do we? No, let's just shoot it. Great. Yeah.
So, I mean, one of the things that is quite striking about your resume is it seems like you don't really have ego in the sense that you will do work as long as it's good work. It doesn't matter what the kind of size of the role is going to be, whether it's one of the lead parts in Upgrade or a smaller part in something else like Dressmaker or other projects that you've worked on. Is that something that you feel like has made you more employable over the years and has kept that sustainability in your career?
I haven't thought of it like that. I mean, you kind of, when you're in the journeyman category, as I seem to have now and forevermore will be known as, you kind of, you audition for what you're given. There's only been a couple of occasions where I've been actually just offered a role outright. And that's usually just been because of personal relationships. I worked for a good few years reading in auditions at Mulliners, and you just get to know the producers and the directors as they came through. And again, it was just an opportunity to always kind of show off a bit in case there was a role. Mm. And on one occasion they were doing Tangle, terrific television show that lasted about 3 seasons here. And there was a role in it for a character named Stavros, and he was about the only character who had popped up that was in my age bracket. And I just sort of thought, God, he's like the assistant to Joel Tobeck's minister in the state parliament. And I emailed my manager and said, look, I don't suppose there's any chance that they'd consider seeing me for that Stavros. I know that obviously I don't look like a Stavros. And they said, you're not going to believe it. We got an email this morning saying they're changing the name of the character to Stanley and they want to offer it to you. And I was like, well, how about that?
That's fucking brilliant.
I know. It was worth asking the question, even though the answer was already there.
Yeah.
But that's one of the few times that's happened.
But again, you put yourself in the position for that to happen.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And you were smart enough to know that there was, even if it was a 1% possibility, there was a possibility that something like that could happen.
Yeah, and there's never any harm in asking.
Yeah.
As my grandmother always used to tell me. There's no harm in asking.
So what's it been like to play some of these more like, people who were based on actual people, like, you said before, young Winston Churchill, and there's a few other real life people that you've portrayed.
Senator Graham Richardson, that was good fun. Moving through the 70s and into the 80s, and getting to work opposite terrific people like Richard Roxburgh and Felix Williamson, Paddy Bramall. Mm. Paddy Bramall and I had a competition to see who could put on the most weight, because I was playing Richo and he was playing Kim Beazley. I think I won by about half a kilo.
Right.
Yeah, but he took it off a lot quicker than I did. But it's wonderful, I mean, I love playing a real person. Playing Churchill, I kind of knew, a bit like everyone else, I guess, the picture of him as Prime Minister much later in life, and hadn't known anything about his life pre-World War I, or what an ambitious little fucker he was. It was him who set off the whole Anzac Day debacle, because he was career-driven and said, no, we can send them through there. Let's do it indeed. Yeah. I need to get back to my correct station in life, So it was great, because you get to learn and research about that, these people, and it's great fun.
I guess there's a lot to dig into as well, especially with someone like Churchill.
Or someone like Richardson.
Yeah, of course.
There was all manner of research and interesting things that you could turn up. Not that, doing research like that actually probably appears on the screen, but it's good to be informed.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so how did the role for Upgrade come about?
An audition.
Right. So it's just the same process as anything else?
Not quite the same. I went in and Nicky Barrett was casting, and my agent had said, look, this is a really great script. Don't think of it as a voiceover. I was like, oh, okay. He sent it through, and in big, bold, black letters down the bottom of the audition script, it said, the producers reserve the right to recast whoever is used as the voice during production. I'm like, oh, fuck. I'm going to get to the premiere, and Morgan Freeman will be playing STEM or something.
Yeah.
But I went in for the audition, and Leigh had apparently instructed Nikki to not to shoot faces, so that she pointed the camera at my shoes, and we did the lines. And then I did a second audition where Logan came in, and we set up a partition between us, so that it was just a voice to him and a voice to me as well. And I don't know, maybe it was just I was able to do it. And the recall audition with Logan, we also established a rapport really quickly, because I sort of said to him, is this your first time in Australia? He's like, no, man, no, I did my first film up in Queensland. That wasn't the Great Raid, was it? I went, yeah. I said, that was my first film as well. I was like, bang, we're off and racing, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. And we also established very early on with the relationship between Gray and Stem. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
That's right, because it gets released in the UK this week.
Yeah.
Actually. But it's out on digital and Blu-ray now in Australia.
Oh, brilliant.
But we kind of wanted to set up this rapport very early on, that it was like an 80s buddy cop movie between these guys. I've got to be careful what I say so I don't give away spoilers now. The basic plot is Gray is an analog guy in a digital world. There is a car accident where his wife is killed and he's made quadriplegic. And a computer genius along the kind of lines of Elon Musk comes forward and says, I have new technology, it's called STEM, this will be able to make you walk. But the little side effect that he didn't tell Gray about was that STEM could talk as well. And so and we worked really hard, because it wasn't like a voiceover. I was on set every day so that we were interacting, which made all the difference. Because I think if you'd tried to make it without the voice there,
with the first AD yelling wild lines,
exactly. I'm afraid I can't do that, Gray. So it was a big challenge. It was a really good challenge. And again, exercising a part of the brain and a part of the approach that I probably hadn't before. We talked extensively about, we didn't want it to sound like Hal from 2001. We didn't want it to sound too much like Kit from Knight Rider. I kept saying that you've cast me because I'm, obviously the male Scarlett Johansson from her, and no one seemed to go along with that one, unfortunately. But we worked really hard, and Leigh gave me all sorts of weird stuff to listen to beforehand, because he kept talking about STEM as being a sociopath, with that disconnect. So he gave me recordings of Jeffrey Dahmer interviews and extreme metal music to listen to, and it's just, I don't know if it helped or not, but the Dahmer interviews were fascinating. Hearing the way this guy spoke about killing, and just so detached from it all.
Yeah. Well, what was Leigh's process like coming into this kind of almost action-y, revenge-y kind of genre piece?
He was very clear about the film that he was wanting to make, and seeing the film up on the screen, there was only one scene that I think we shot that didn't end up there. So the script was pretty much locked and in place.
Yeah, that's tight.
Yeah. And I guess that's also because, the limitations of budget and length of shooting and all the rest of it. I didn't do a great deal of ADR for it either. I think I had one 3-hour session while I was in Vancouver one year.
Yeah, right. I just would have assumed that you would have gone back and...
No. Most of it we got on location. There were concerns because, as you moved around 2 different locations, there's different acoustics and all that sort of thing, and STEM should probably have a pretty uniform tone and melody to him. So I think those were the bits that we may have just gone over, or just on the day there was a noise in the background. But the first day that I was on was, well, the first 2 days where you would have seen in the trailer the big fight sequence.
Yeah.
That was the way that we kicked things off. I think that was day 2 of filming.
Yeah, right.
And it was amazing in this tiny little weatherboard shitbox house. And no one quite knew what these fight sequences were going to look like. And I had a monitor and was kind of sequestered off in a different room and could see it rather than on the camera rather than what was happening in the room. And I walked back out after one of these takes and just went, holy fuck, guys. Like, what? All the crew are looking at me going, like, what? We didn't see anything. And I was like, you wait till you see it on the screen. This looks amazing.
Yeah.
So they were very, very clever. Stefan Dussier was the cinematographer.
See the DP?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's a great gig.
Yeah. But all that fight stuff was just fascinating because they filmed it at 25 frames a second, and Logan had an iPhone attached to his chest which sent a signal to the camera rig which operated on a 360 bevel, and so the camera mirrored him absolutely.
Really? Oh, wow.
It's cool. Really simple stuff though when you think about it. And it's all being done in camera, which was amazing. There's so little CGI stuff in there.
Mm.
Yeah. And again, it's so exciting to see it all happening.
Yeah, I could imagine it would be quite thrilling and then like almost inspiring. It's kind of like everything's being elevated because everything's being elevated.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And, even just, you'd have lunch and chat with Leigh or chat with Logan. And, Logan was in the middle of writing a script, which he's now directed. Leigh is nothing if not prolific. The guy knows how to, he blinks and a franchise comes out, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But, that got me motivated as well to, stop talking about ideas that I've got for scripts potentially and just to sit down and actually start writing, which is something that I do try and do with far more regularity. I could do it a bit more. But it's like, I had an interview with Paul Thomas Anderson again, and he said, if you're a writer, you just got to get up and write, man.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what you're writing, eventually something's going to come from it. Yeah.
It's like the Jerry Seinfeld thing of not breaking the chain, which is like he's got I think it's on his calendar, he just writes an X for every day that he writes.
Right.
And that's the chain. You never break the chain.
How interesting. That's great, isn't it?
But I think, when you do have, or when you are immersed in those environments with those people who are prolific at what they do, it can only be inspiring if you let it be for people who are creative. And then you just want to be working and collaborating in these environments because that's kind of that's the goal, I think, for me anyway.
Yeah.
Not necessarily to be making whatever $1 million productions, but to be collaborating with and working with great creatives.
Yeah, because it's the sum of the parts. Yeah, it's like if you're in a band, the only music that can be produced by those 4 or 5 people in that room is the music that is produced at that moment with those people listening and interacting. It's all about making music, and it's exactly the same on a set or in a theatre or wherever. And in general in life, you would hope that it was like that. I don't know. I've never really worked in an office. So.
Me either.
Yeah.
Well, I've worked in a production office, but that's not really the same, I don't think. So were there any, aside from the challenges that we've spoken about in terms of it being a unique acting experience, were there any day-to-day or kind of week-to-week challenges that you or the crew faced in putting this together?
From a purely personal perspective, yeah, because initially Logan was going to wear an earpiece, and I would be well and truly offset and talking into a microphone that he could hear and that Leigh could hear, and obviously the sound guys. But that quickly proved that it wasn't going to be practical because he was always sort of straining and listening with one ear to what was going on. And we tried a few different things, but in the end, the bulk of the stuff I was either sitting directly below the camera lens, unless it was moving, but just sitting just offset so that he could hear me clearly, we could interact. So that was a challenge. I guess with anything that's got a limited budget, there was only one night where I saw the temperature start to rise a little bit, where it's the last shot of the film, and Leigh just said, "I don't care if we're going over time. We need to have a last shot. We can get away with any multitude of sins if the last shot of your film looks good, you know." And pacing and muttering back and forth with the producers and the line producers and everything like that. But in the end, you know, he got it, and we got it. It looks awesome. But that was really the only time that I can remember things getting a little fraught.
Right.
Perhaps one other night, but I think that was just because it was 4:30 in the morning and everyone was ready to go home.
So it was mostly night shoots, was it? A
lot of night shoots. A lot of the location stuff in the middle of the film kind of takes place at night. So there's a building down on Johnson Street in Collingwood that we used for a bunch of different sets that was just unused.
Yeah.
That was great.
It must have been like, there must have been you must have gotten a kick from making this American action film in your hometown.
Yeah, well, I mean, the only two American people on set were Logan and Betty Gabriel. Both of whom were fantastic, and I'm now very grateful to call friends.
Yeah.
And, you know, occasionally one of the producers, but all the crew, all the rest of the cast were Australian. So yeah, it was a hell of a buzz.
Yeah.
You know, if just getting to, you know, muck about with an American accent, it's always fun. Yeah. It's like we're making movies like they do in LA.
Yeah. So from the time that That's a Wrap was called to South by Southwest, what was that kind of period of time?
About 12 months.
Okay.
Yeah, we shot at the start of 2017.
It was like a 4-week shoot or something?
Might have been 5, possibly 5, 6. Yeah, it wouldn't have been too long though, just again because of budgetary stuff. But I think it may have been 5, with a couple of weeks of pre as well. And again, you know, I sort of had no guarantee that I was going to be the voice in the film. And when we were shooting the film, it was called STEM rather than Upgrade. And I played STEM, so I was like, I'm like the title character.
Yeah.
If they don't replace me with someone. And then I was overseas, and they were about to do some test screenings, and I got a call from Leigh saying, "Look, I need these lines. Where are you?" And I said, "I'm in Vancouver." He said, "Do we know any studios?" Yep. Okay, yeah, we'll get a studio set up in Vancouver because I need these lines before this test screening. I was like, "Whoa, okay, breathe, mate, breathe." We'll get it done. No worries.
Yeah.
So I figured when they were getting me in to do for the test screening, there was maybe my percentage was on the rise a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I just I went in to do one final lot of ADR earlier this year, and my wife and I had a trip planned over to the States because she was having a photography exhibition in Chicago, and Leigh kind of jokingly said down the line, "Don't suppose you're going to be in the States in March, are you?" And I went, "Funny you should mention that. When's this screening?" So yeah, we changed the flights and got along.
Yeah.
It was fantastic.
Went to South by Southwest.
South by Southwest.
And
because you were there this year as well, weren't you?
Yeah, I was there, I think about a week after you. I was there for the music part, working on
we had to split pretty quickly.
Doc.
Right.
Yeah, I'd never been before. It's pretty wild.
It's a great town.
Yeah.
Good barbecue.
Very good barbecue. Delicious barbecue.
Yeah. No, it's nice. I'd love to go back and experience there was still music everywhere. You'd walk down 7th or whatever that main street was, and just all the bars all had bands in every window with the doors open. It's like, man, this is what Melbourne and Sydney used to be like.
It's pretty wild, like how it just kind of takes over the town, and you can't go anywhere without hearing amazing music, whether it's to your taste or not. It's there's an appreciation for what it means to be in that city for that moment of time.
Yeah. And I mean, that's where Richard Linklater's from, and there's a real creative buzz there for what is essentially a college town. the university is enormous.
And the film festival there has almost taken Sundance's mantle as the kind of indie.
Yeah.
As Sundance is becoming more and more mainstream.
Yeah, I would think so.
I think South by is really, it's pretty mainstream now as well.
I mean, not to say that the night after we had our premiere, Steven Spielberg was in town with Ready Player One.
Yeah.
So it's not that indie, is it?
No, yeah, I guess not. So I guess it must be cool now to, like you said, it's available on digital download and Blu-ray in Australia, and that's like this kind of tangible thing that you have. And, you've got plenty of these experiences and jobs that you've done over the years. But I guess I wonder, we talked about what your MO was when you kind of got out of drama school, and how that's kind of shifted and moved now. What's the kind of MO for success at the moment?
Oh, look, it's really in this country, I think it's just if you can be working fairly continuously, that's a pretty successful career, without sort of hitting the big lights of kind of Hollywood and that sort of thing within Australia, and without being a household name. If you can work consistently, then as I've grown older, you start to realise that that's a pretty useful thing to have, and probably a pretty good barometer of how people value your work.
Yeah.
Because I guess that's the thing. And I'm about to do a couple of episodes of Glitch for the ABC.
Oh, great.
And then I'm doing
Patrick Bramall.
Yes, Patrick Bramall.
No weight gain contest in this one, I assume.
No, probably not. Then I'm doing a new Australian play with Red Stitch over in St Kilda for the end of the year, which is great. It's a wonderful new play called Lamb by Jane Bodie, and with songs written by Mark Seymour. So I get to have a bit of a strum on the guitar and a sing as well, which is great. And then next year, actually I don't think I'm allowed to tell you what I'm doing next year. It hasn't been announced yet. So
well, then we'll have to come back for it.
We'll have to come back, this time next year, and I can tell you all about it.
Adventures of the Journeyman continue.
Indeed.
Well, thank you so much, Simon, for doing this little ramble, tangential retrospective on your life and career.
It's my absolute pleasure. I think it must be nearly 10 years since we first worked on that short film of yours, Shotgun.
It's more than 10 years.
More than 10 years.
2007.
Gosh, time flies.
It certainly does. I end all of my conversations with the same question. Question is, what makes you silly?
Family make me silly.
Yeah.
My nieces and nephews, because I think I'm just really a big kid at heart, but I can get very silly with them. My sister and I still, whenever we answer the phone, I could call my sister now and put her on speakerphone. Without doubt, she'd answer it and go, "Face of snot," or "Have you got snot on your face?" Which is that's just from Drop Dead Fred that we loved growing up.
Yeah.
Family make me silly because they make me smile, and that's a good thing.
And that's a silly, sentimental thing to end on. Thanks so much, Simon.
Thanks, bud.